Hi, everyone. This is Professor Zeese again. I hope you all are having a great Tuesday. Today is actually going to be a pretty quick lecture on basic theater terms because I'm going to be throwing around a lot more of these terms in some of the next discussions as we go deeper into the course. And it's good for everyone to just have a baseline knowledge about some of the common terms that we use. So let's just get this started. So first off, um, upstage and downstage, right? So if you see this little diagram here, you have that fella who is looking out at the audience who is seated, right? Now, if you remember the ancient Greek and Roman stages as well, the audience was actually on a rake, which means it was on an incline, right? Because there's two ways to solve the problem of how does all the audience see all the stage, right? One of them needs to be on some sort of incline for everyone in the back to see everyone, right? Um, and the ancient Greeks and Romans solved that problem by putting the audience on an incline. But a little bit later on, and in some stages today, they solved that problem by putting the actual stage on what is called a rake, right? So it's just a slant. And the reason and when they have it at a slant, right, behind, right, to the very back of the stage, it is literally higher off the ground than the part that is toward the audience, which is where the terms up stage, right, because you're literally walking up an elevation as you're going back, and then down stage because you're literally going down an elevation as you go toward the audience. So that is where upstage and downstage means, or where they come from. That also is where the term to upstage someone comes from. I may have talked about this before, but if, let's say, two people are having a conversation on stage and they're about at the same distance from the audience, but one of them starts moving up stage, what it does is they slowly start to turn toward the audience and you're forcing the other person to kind of turn away, right? And so you're stealing the spotlight, upstaging them. So here's a diagram. So let's say the audience is down right at the bottom. Right? It's just kind of a bird's eye view of a stage. Um, so center stage is the center of the stage, right? You have upstage center, downstage center, right? Up and down of center. Now, stage right and stage left, if you think about it from the perspective of the performer, right? Going to the right, to the performer's right, means going to the audience's left, right? And in theater, we always use the perspective of the performer on stage as far as where on the stage they are. So you can have stage right and stage left. Right? And you can combine those two, just like a compass. You can have north and east, south and west. You can have, southwest. Right here, you can have upstage right, upstage left, downstage right. Right. Um, or you just down right and that kind of thing. That would be perfectly fine. So those are both locations on the stage, but they are also directions in which you move. So let's say you're downstage left, right? And you moved upstage from downstage left, you would pass through stage left and then to upstage left because you're moving up stage. Even if you don't end up all the way upstage, you're still moving in that direction. Now, this theater again, this is kind of like a proscenium, right, where the audience is on one side of kind of a fourth wall, and the stage is on the other side of that wall. You can see these blue kind of squigglies; those represent curtains, or maybe even the proscenium arch, right, which is carried through from the proscaenon, right, and the parascaenon on each side, right, that picture frame that you see the stage. Um, Further stage right into the part that the audience can't see, you'd say that is off right or the right wing. Right. Same thing with left, off left, or the left wing. Right. Because when you are on stage, you're visible to the audience, and when you're off stage, you're not. Backstage would be the area behind the curtain. And uh, some also we'd call backstage a lot of the areas that are things like the dressing room, the makeup room, places that the audience does not ever go or see. And where the audience sits, also called the house, incidentally. So what is blocking, right? You hear the term blocking. What is that? That is the physical arrangement and movement of actors, right? It's the sports metaphor would be that's the play called, right? You go here, you do this on this line, you go here, right? Blocking. Now, a cross, that could be two things. You can have a cross, like the noun cross, or you can cross, right? The verb. So a cross could be an actor's movement from one part of the stage to the other. So I could say, okay, I'm going to cross from right to left, right? Or I'm going to make a cross from up center to down right, right? So that can be a noun or a verb. Usually across, to use that term means a relatively big movement, like across the stage. Um, and then off and on, right? Again, off stage and on stage. Off stage means the audience cannot see you. On stage means the audience can see you. Or, even if there's a blackout, it doesn't suddenly become off stage, but you know what I mean. Now, because we already used up and down to refer to, going away from the audience or going toward the audience, what about literally going down in elevation, straight down, and then up toward, the lights and the catwalk? Typically, that's going to be in and out, right? And so you can bring a drop or a drape in or a curtain in, or you can bring it out, right? And mentioning above and below refers to also upstage or downstage of something. So if a director were to say, hey, on this line, can you go cross above that chair? Okay, I'm going to move and walk so that I'm upstage of that chair. Right? Again, the house is where the audience sits. Now, not just location, but where you are facing, right? Kind of orientation. This still also assumes that the audience is, at the bottom of the screen here. So full front means you are, your shoulders are going toward each wing and you are speaking to the audience. They can see all of you, right? Full back is the opposite, right? They can see the back of your head and your heels, right? That is full back. Now, if you're turned to either side, right, profile right is if, again, from the perspective of the person on stage, you are turning toward the right? So again, the audience is left, and profile left, same thing. Your full profile, halfway between full back and full front, facing the wing. Now, we can say 3/4 front and 3/4 back, right? Now, the reason why we say 3/4 is because you are, 3/4 is more one than zero, right? And so you are more front than back. So 3/4 front is more front, 3/4 back is more back. You wouldn't want to say like a quarter front because it makes more sense to refer to back if you're facing mainly backstage, right? So that's what those are. Yeah, again, sight lines are very important. They are hypothetical lines from the audience's eyes to what is seen on stage, right? And so if you were to say, to someone off stage who's kind of peeking around and sees a little bit of the audience, hey, you're in the audience's sight line, right? Oh no, right? You can see that. So you would need to leave. Essentially, if you can see the audience, they can see you. To cheat out, it is to turn one's body slightly more toward the audience, right? To cheat means, maybe if you're facing in profile, right, the person who you're talking to is literally in profile, right, with you. But instead of looking directly that way, you might orient your body outward just a little bit, right? So you can give more of yourself to the audience, right? That's to cheat out just a little bit. Now, again, the fourth wall is the imaginary invisible wall between the actors and the audience, right? So the fourth wall is a kind of a place on stage. Typically the proscenium arch or maybe a little bit further out. But it is also kind of a conceptual or abstract idea. It is also the abstract separation between an audience and the performers, right? So the fourth wall, most often when you come across that term, you hear it when someone talks about breaking the fourth wall, right? You reach through or punch through that abstract separation between the audience and the performers, right? So breaking the fourth wall would be if a character on stage says, hey, audience, yes, you in the front row, with the blue shirt and sandals, right? Because typically, right, an audience feels a little bit like a voyeur, right? Looking into people who do not know that they are there, right? You're just kind of peering into people's lives. But if you break that fourth wall, the artifice of theater, that you're watching something really happening as opposed to people play acting, right? That is broken. Now, in other things too, you can talk about film as well, breaking the fourth wall, even though there's no wall, right? But let's say a performer looks straight down the barrel of the lens and says, hello, everyone sitting in the cinema right now. right? And talks to the audience. You know, video games can break the fourth wall. Books can break the fourth wall when talking about, hello reader, right? Isn't this book heavy, kind of thing. Right. Again, the mise en scène, that is all the visual aspects of the play. Right? We're not talking about plot directly. We're not talking about character directly or dialogue directly. This is everything that you can see. Right. So this is costumes, sets, props, makeup, all these sorts of things. It's kind of a visual language of the different plays or a play. Now, a run through is a rehearsal where you go from one point, usually the beginning, to the end, right? To another point without stopping and working things in the middle, right? A run through is to see how a rehearsed piece kind of fits together as a whole. Now, you can make variations on that term, a run through. You know, you can do, let's say this is the first time that you're doing a run through. You might call it a stumble through, right? Because you know that you're going to not do well. You're going to stumble and trip, and it's not going to work very well. But the point would be from getting from one end to the other. You could do, a speed through, right? Which is a type of run through that is intentionally extremely fast, right? And you can run through a scene and that kind of thing as well. Now, an aside, that is a line that is spoken to the audience, but is not intended to be heard by others on stage, right? So most of the time when people are speaking on stage, there is the abstract conception that other people on stage can hear them, right? And then the audience is kind of spying a little bit. But let's say a character cheats out, breaks the fourth wall, and says one little tiny thing to the audience to give them a little bit more information or a little bit of a peek into their psychology, but the other people on stage don't really hear it. That would be an aside, right? So if two people are talking and then one person says, hey, get a load of this guy, and goes back and keeps talking, right? That would be an aside. Now, talking about the different people that you may meet, right, in the theater, the actor is um, the easiest one to conceive of, right? The one who performs on stage. A director is the artistic supervisor of the production, usually with broad artistic control over rehearsals, action, how the play will look, and final say with design elements. The director makes sure every artistic decision belongs to the same play. Right. So in terms of, again, the artistry, right, the buck stops there with the director. Now, different directors do work different ways. Some are very dictatorial with, they essentially have all design elements and blocking and everything in mind, and it's just kind of up to other people to fulfill that. But others do delegate a lot more of the artistic responsibility and idea generation to the other artists who are there. Now, the playwright is a person who writes plays, right? They are the originator of the script, right? Most of the time when we're talking about plays, especially the ones that we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about written plays. Right? And so they're the ones who are, writing it, I think, or a typewriter or computer or whatever. But sometimes, let's say you are doing a play where you have a whole bunch of actors who are actually improvising lines, right? And they start improvising and there's a scene that takes place. This is all in rehearsal. And they go kind of along with that and they develop it and the scene becomes more interesting and more honed, right? Then you could kind of think that the playwright is the cast itself, right? But most of the time it is the person who writes the script before it is produced. Now, the producer is the person who is in charge of the financial, managerial, and administrative parts of the play, including hiring and firing, fundraising, budgeting, and marketing. Right? Most of the time, the producer in any kind of medium or large uh, uh, outfit, I guess you could say, would be that kind of resident theater, right? And so let's say the Guthrie Theater, right, in Minneapolis, right? They are the producing company, right? And then they would actually hire directors to come in, right? They would determine what the season would be, what plays to put on. They would hire all the designers, right? And so they're ultimately in charge of that sort of thing. But again, they usually, and their role is to delegate the artistic decision making to the director on any one play. Now, of course, there's obviously designers, right? The set designer designs the physical space on stage, the set itself. The costume designer designs the clothing, right? Typically in conjunction very tightly with hair and makeup. Most of the time they're the same person, but in larger um, producing companies, they are different. The sound designer, right, designs the sonic audio aspects of the show, including ambient sounds, music, and live effects, right? And so they would be not just piping sound through, the speaker system, but they would also be in charge of making sounds that need to happen off stage. A big, huge sheet of tin, waving it for thunder, right? That kind of thing. The lighting designer, they design how the stage will be lit, right? Including, right, practical effects. Now, when I say practical effects, let's say that you have a scene on stage where someone goes into this darkened room and turns on a lamp, and then the lights come on. Right. You could do that of one of a couple of different ways, right? You can imagine a scenario in which someone would come on stage, um, you know, turn on a light, but nothing actually happens there. But then the lighting designer brings up lights from, the catwalk and stuff, right? Or you can imagine a scenario in which they actually go on stage and turn on a light that is plugged in, right? If it is a literal light on stage, or even like a phone that literally rings, that is called a practical effect. But again, the lighting designer does everything dealing with lighting. The properties designer, props is short for properties, right? They design objects that will populate the stage. Um, uh, Props and costumes and sets. Sometimes the edges between those can be a little bit murky, right? Um, let's say there is a bed, right, and it's made, um, and that's typically going to be the set designer, right? Set dressing. But let's say someone comes in, takes a pillow, and tosses it at someone else, right? That could be a prop too, and so they have to talk with each other about that. A stage manager. Now, stage manager, they are responsible for the smooth running of rehearsals and performances, right? The stage manager is the person who has, like the big, huge book. They kind of know everything, right? If you have a question about what's going on with any kind of other area of the production, the stage manager would be the one who would know. They actually call cues for the show, right? They are up in the booth with the lighting and sound board operators during the show. With the script open and with cues marked, saying, okay, ready, sound cue, cue, and light cue 43, sound and light, go, right? And then they push the buttons. Yeah, they're very important. ASMs, assistant stage managers, right? They, not surprisingly, assist the stage manager. Often they are backstage, right? They are a part of like the run crew. Um, they help, pull ropes in the fly system to bring things in and out. They help with quick changes backstage, help with the props tables, all that kind of stuff, and generally communicate with the stage manager, because the stage manager is up in the booth, far away from the stage itself. And so the stage manager's eyes and ears actually backstage would be the ASM. Cool. So I would like to thank you all. I know this was relatively quick, but I hope you all have a great Tuesday. And I will see you later.